Okay. So like I was saying, typically we would go to the advanced settings and place an object or a replacement object directly into the custom package. When you're using the wizard, it automatically places it into a package for you. How that's actually controlled is through your system settings, which is found here on the System Designer page under the System Setup header. Let me go ahead and click on System Settings, and I'll show you guys how to modify that. So those of you who use development instances will typically have, multiple, at least one separate package that's moved to your production instance. And as most of you are aware, the custom package always sits at the bottom of the hierarchy. So what I'm going to do, the easiest way to find a specific system setting that you're looking for is to use the filtration functionality. And the one that controls what package your customizations are being placed into is called the current package system setting. So I'm going to run a quick filter for current, and we see that proper system setting here. If I open that up, what you'll see is it allows you to specify the default value of what package your customizations are going to be stored in. So I am going to target the custom package, and I'm going to go ahead and save that. The other system setting I like to point out while I'm here is something I get a lot of questions about, is you'll notice when you go to make changes within a wizard or within an object directly, bpm'online always uses a prefix as part of that object name or what it's going to be named in the database. Get a lot of questions about how that's controlled. It's actually controlled through a system setting called prefix for object name. So what I've done is done a quick contain search for the word prefix. If I open that up, we'll see the default value is what's actually controlling that prefix. Okay, it uses USR by default for user. If you worked with technology advisors on your implementation, a lot of times what you'll see is a bunch of objects that have been created with the TAI prefix. I'm going to leave it as the default USR for this demonstration. So I don't actually need to save that because I haven't changed anything. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel. And we can go ahead and get started with the section wizard. All right, so I'm going to go back to my system designer by clicking on the gear icon. And we find the section wizard also listed under the system setup header. So as most of you are aware, if you access the section wizard through your system designer page, like we're about to, that's only used to create new sections, okay? If I want to modify an existing section or one of the out-of-the-box sections, you'd actually launch that section wizard through the view menu in whichever section you want to modify. We'll see that a little bit later when we add this new custom section into the account section. So let's go ahead and click on the section wizard. Like I mentioned on the slides, the very first screen it's going to bring you to is a page where you can set the properties or the settings of your new section, okay? So the very first thing it needs is a title. So this is what's actually going to display in your section panel. What is your new section going to be called? I'm going to do, the use case I'm going to build out today is we're going to be tracking assets that have been placed at a customer location. Okay, so again, very similar to the installed equipment use case we used in our last user group. The code is what it's going to be stored as in the database. You can see it's already included our prefix that was defined in the prefix for object name system setting. Okay, so that cannot be modified. If I did not want to use this prefix, I would need to modify that system setting before I make any changes here in the section wizard. So it's easy to find later. As a best practice, I would recommend giving it the same name or using the same code that you've used in the title. You also need to place your new section into a workplace, okay? You don't necessarily have to do this step. You can see it's not required, but if I want to get to my new section quickly and easily, I can place it directly on one of my existing workplaces. If I forget to do this for whatever reason, you can always come back and make those changes within the workplace setup option on your system designer. Okay. Below that, we see the section pages subheader. So this is where we're actually going to define our edit page, which we'll see in just a moment. And then we see some of those settings around the mini page I mentioned earlier. So this is somewhat new functionality. You're able to define where those mini pages are going to be used. Whether that's going to be used when you add a record, edit a record, or view a record. You can see it's grayed out right now. That's because I haven't actually defined any edit pages yet. Down below that, we have the ability to enable or disable approvals. So approvals are enabled by default in invoices and contracts, I believe. You can, of course, enable or add approvals to any section within BPM Online, and that includes custom sections. All right. Across here at the top, I mentioned earlier the ability to define business cases or set up the dynamic case management. So this is the functionality that you would see in leads and opportunities within BPM Online. That can, of course, be added to custom sections as well. I think we're going to cover that in a future user group, but we're not going to be using dynamic case management today, nor are we going to be building any business processes specific to our new asset section. Instead, I'm very simply going to come down here, click the Setup Page option, and define an edit page for our new section. Okay. So Section Wizard has a bit of a new look and feel since they've rolled out these changes. So this might look a little bit different than what most of you or some of you are used to, but all of the functionality is still here. What you'll notice is when you create a brand new section, it automatically puts the name of the record in the profile card, that little left-hand container that you see used in the majority of BPM Online sections. For this section, I don't think I need the profile card, so I'm actually going to remove that name field, and I'm going to move it over here to the header portion of this new edit page we're designing. You'll also notice that when you use Section Wizard to create a custom section, it automatically generates the attachment and note functionality, as well as the feed functionality. And those are placed on the tabs for you as part of your new record, or your new edit page, excuse me. All right, so I removed the name field from the profile card, so it's actually been placed over here in the existing columns with the rest of the system columns that come or are automatically created or inherited anytime you create a new section object. I'm going to move name back out onto the layout, but like I mentioned, I'm going to put it on the header portion of the edit page this time, as I don't want to use the profile card. And that's fine. If I don't have any fields placed on the profile card will not be visible within a record in my new section. I actually want my records to be named by their serial number, so I'm actually going to rename the name field to be called serial number by clicking the pencil icon. Okay. So let's go ahead and drag out all of the information or create fields for all of the information that we want to track. So one of the things I mentioned on my slides is we're going to need a relationship back to the account section if we want to place this information on an account page. So what I'm going to do is create a new lookup field that references the account section. That's how I'm going to set up that relationship. So I've already dragged the a new lookup field or a new lookup column out here onto the blank space of the Section Wizard, and now I'm going to define the properties for this lookup field. So what are we going to title this? What's going to be the label on this field? I'm going to simply call it account because we're referencing an account. And in the database, we're going to call it account as well. Keep in mind we do need our prefix still, which is still being controlled by the system setting. So for our lookup, we're actually going to select an existing lookup, and we're going to directly target the account section by specifying account. Okay? It defaults to use the pop-up window rather than the list view, and that's going to be just fine. If we wanted to make it required read-only or any of these other advanced settings, we'd be able to control that from here as well. The next thing I want to be able to track is when this asset was installed or placed at a customer location. To do that, I'm going to use a date field, and I'll go ahead and drag that out right under the serial number. So we'll go ahead and give this a label, and we'll give it a name for the database as well. Go ahead and save. Also want to track if my equipment or my asset is ever removed from a customer location. So we'll do another date field. And then we need to track what type of asset has been placed at a customer location. So I'm going to do an additional lookup. We're going to call this the equipment type. And this time, rather than select an existing lookup, we're going to create a new lookup, as I have not yet created an object for this lookup list. So So when I select Add New Lookup, you'll see my options change slightly. I need to provide a title and a name for my new lookup. I'm just going to simply call this the equipment type list. And for the name, we do need to use our prefix, equipment type list. And for this option, I'm actually going to present that as a list view rather than that magnifying glass pop-up window. Okay. Go ahead and save. I want to track how much we charge for this asset or how much we charge for the installation. So I'm actually going to use a decimal type field, label that install cost. And then I'm going to use a string or a text field to capture some notes about this asset. Simply title this Notes. And I am going to enable multi-line text. Oops. I am going to enable multi-line text so I can resize that box dynamically. So I go ahead and save this. Let's go ahead and make it look a little nicer. I'll drag the notes out to take a little bit more space. And then I'm not going to add any new tabs or add any new field groups down here at the bottom. I'm going to stick with the standard attachment note functionality as well as my feed. Okay. So let's go ahead and go back to the section wizard now that we've defined our edit page, and we can go ahead and hit save to commit these changes. This will take a moment to save. I noticed one thing I neglected to mention. This little icon that's displayed here is the icon that will show up in your section panel. So if you have a custom icon or some sort of image you want to use, you could select that simply by changing what's displayed here in the section wizard. Okay. Loading. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and set the list pages column settings now. All right, so I'm back in the asset section that we just created. Again, we don't have any records yet, but I'm going to go ahead and set my columns ahead of time, and then we'll see how those column settings are used once we're able to import my sample records. So anytime you want to change your column settings, you're going to do that through your View menu, and we're going to go to Select Fields to Display. Like I mentioned when I was going through the slides, by default, it's only going to place the name of the record in the list view, which in this instance is not going to be very useful at all, as we're using that field to store serial number information. So I'm going to shrink this way down in size, and let's go ahead and add some additional columns. So what's the most important information? So we want to see which account this asset has been placed at. Let's go ahead and see when it was installed, what type of equipment was used, and how much that install cost. Okay. I think that'll be sufficient. If we did have any records, it would give us a preview of what this columns would look like, but we'll just have to come back once we've done our data import. So I could go ahead and save this, or since I'm a system admin, I could go ahead and use the drop-down and select the Save for All Users, which I would certainly recommend. So anytime you are adding or deploying a custom section, you do want to save these column settings across the entire system. Otherwise, you're going to get a bunch of questions from your users, I'm sure. We're going to go to the Detail Wizard. Again, in our last user group, we had to first create a new object to use the Detail Wizard. This time, we're just going to use the same object that we're using for the custom section. So all we need to do is specify the object, which is going to be the Assets object, and provide a title. I'm going to call this the Assets Detail. There is no need to define a separate edit page or any business rules. It's going to use the same edit page that's already been defined for this section. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. This one should go pretty quickly as it does not need to generate any new objects. Once it finishes saving, we'll go ahead and place it again on the account section using the section wizard. Close this tab, and now we're back at the System Designer page. So I'll very briefly start by looking at an account record. So most of the asset records I imported belong to this account XT group. If I open up its account record, what we see here is just the out-of-the-box account layout. So there have not been any customizations made to the account section to this point. But what I want to do is right here at the top on the Account Info tab is display our new detail so we can see all of the assets that are associated with this account, and also add a chart so we can track how many installs we're doing over time. Okay. So again, to do so, I'm going to use the View menu and open the Section Wizard. Like I said earlier, if you open the Section Wizard from the System Designer, that's used to create new sections. If you want to modify an existing section, you have to open it up from the View menu within that section. Okay. So what we see here is the account edit page. If I wanted to make any changes, I of course could. But the only change I want to make is get my detail here and get my chart here. So I'm going to click the New Detail button. It's going to ask me which detail I want to add. I'm going to specify the assets detail that we just created. The caption on page is filled out automatically based on the name of the detail. I'm just going to call it assets. The detail column is used to link this information back to an account record, so I need to specify the account column. And for the object column, we're going to use the ID value. Okay. So let's go ahead and save that. You'll see it places it down here at the bottom. I'm going to actually drag that up a little higher so we don't have to scroll all the way down to see it. And now it'll be at the top of the Account Info tab. If I needed to modify those settings for whatever reason, I could do so by using this pencil icon, and that would allow me to modify my detail settings. In a chart directly on my account edit page to actually, see some high-level information about those assets. And I can actually do so through this Page Elements functionality within the Section Wizard. Again, this is somewhat new functionality. I believe this was added a couple releases ago by bpm'online. So it's something, not all of our customers have yet taken advantage of, but the ones who have, I think really enjoy it. If I do want to drag a chart out onto the edit page, I do need a field group for that. So I'm going to hit the New Field Group button. It's going to ask me for a title. So the title is what the field group is called. I get a ton of questions about this, but the title is not required. So you do not need to have a name for your field group. If you don't want any text displayed on the screen, that's fine. And I'm going to drag that up here to the top, and we're going to place this above our asset detail. So let's go ahead and drag a chart element out into my new field group. And that's going to allow us to define what exactly we're charting. Okay. So what are we going to display? We're going to display asset information. So I'm going to specify the asset object. We're going to do a count. And I think I want to use a column chart. And we're going to group our records by their install date. So I'm going to specify the install date here. And we're going to see them grouped by the month and year. Okay, so right now it builds out a preview chart of all of the assets that we have in our database or in our bpm'online instance. And that's because I have not yet tied it to a specific account. We're going to sort by our grouping order in ascending order, and that's all fine. I don't think I'm going to do a filter, but I do want to associate this information with our section data. I'm going to do so by specifying that we're going to use the account ID. And we'll go ahead and change the color just for fun. All right. Let's go ahead and save. I'm going to resize this a bit so it's not so crammed. Oops. Let me make it a good amount bigger. All right, once I have it moved to the right size, go ahead and hit Section Wizard, which should bring us back to the properties. And then from there, we'll be able to save and deploy these changes. Again, the Section Wizard always takes a bit. All right, so let's go ahead and save this. It shouldn't take too long because, again, we're not creating any new objects. When you are creating new objects via Section Wizard, that's when you see those really lengthy load times. Okay, I'm going to close my Section Wizard, and I'm going to go ahead and clear my cache and refresh this page one more time. So what we should see, assuming I set this up correctly, is a chart directly within our account record, as well as our new detail directly within our account record. It does look like that information has come over properly. So we are able to see a chart of all of our asset installs over time directly within the XT group account record. And we can see all of the different assets that are linked to this account in the new detail we just created. Okay. So just like when we set our section list view, anytime you create a new detail, it needs to have its list view set as well. I could do so by using this little 3-dot action menu, going to column setup. I don't think the notes or account is very useful because I'm within an account record, so they're all going to be linked to this particular account. Instead, I'll do my install cost and equipment type. Go ahead and save that for all users, and we see those changes immediately reflected in my list.